I loved this book. I loved how unserious it was. Going in, I didn't know what to expect. All I knew is that it was about dragons and it had enemies to lovers, and I like dragons and I love enemies to lovers, so I wanted to see what this was about, so I gave it a try. And I know I'm a little bit late to the Fourth Wing tea party, but I just finished the audiobook and I'm here and I want to talk about it, so we're gonna talk about it. Where do I even begin with this? Like, I don't even know where to begin, to be honest. Okay, so I feel like this book did not give a fuck. Reading this book, you could just tell it did not give a fuck. Everything about it was so unserious, and I fucking loved it. Okay, so let's start off with Violet, the main character of the story. I think Violet stayed true to her character throughout the book. I think she was the most consistent in terms of character, because in the beginning, Violet started off whining about being weak, feeling weak, being seen as weak, all things weak. And then when she got all this power, then she started whining about that too. So I thought, damn, this is really consistent. I like it. I like it. It's good consistency. Consistency is never bad when it comes to stories. Unless you want actual progress and you might want to change things up, but I could work with her. I could work with Violet. I could see where she was coming from. I understand Violet a little bit, I guess. Okay, I forgot to mention this, but I had also heard that this book was a mix between The Hunger Games and acotar. I haven't read The Hunger Games, so I can't speak on that behalf, but I have read acotar, and I can tell you that's 100% true.
I'm just like you. You are? You're just like me.
And I know acotar doesn't own this kind of genre and fantasy, like, obviously, but this book was just so alike. They were literally discussing the same tropes, and the characters were incredibly alike. Now, with that in mind, let me introduce you to the Rhysand of the story, aka Xaden, aka Rhysand 2.0, because they're literally the same person, just in an alternate universe. I could not take this character seriously. Anything about him, everything about him, honestly, I couldn't take him seriously. Not that I could take any other character seriously for that matter, but especially Xaden. Like, I feel like he was just trying too hard. And I feel like this could be attributed to me listening to the audiobook version of this, which did not do Xaden any favors. Like, it was bad. But even outside of that, I feel like Xaden he didn't give dangerous, you know? He didn't give oh my god, I'm scared. He didn't give, oh my god, I should stay away from this man. No. His whole aura or his whole character was that he's so dangerous, he's so powerful. But I just could not get into it because of Violet's constant thirsting over him. There were some scenes where I was kind of getting into it. I was like, okay, like I can see him being dangerous. But then Violet would come up and be like, but Xaden is so handsome, and his eyes and his lips and his muscles. And I was just like, girl, oh my god, like, chill out. I could not get it. Because of that, in my head, Xaden was just a hottie with an attitude problem whose favorite food was chocolate cake. Like, that's it. That's all he had going for him. And also, going back to acotar, the way Xaden is introduced is literally Farah and Rhysand meeting all over again. Xaden is just walking in and he's all broody and dangerous and blah blah blah, and Violet's instant thought is, wow, this man is beautiful, which is literally Farah and Rhysand meeting all over again. And I mean, Shadow Wielder, Night Court, potato, you know, I get why people continue to say that. And that's where the similarities begin. I don't have anything else to say about Xaden, to be honest. I just could not take him seriously. His character felt a little too forced, and the audiobook just, I don't know. I feel like I would have liked him a little bit more if I had just read the book, because the audiobook made it so cringe. Anything that would come out of his mouth sounded strained. It sounded like he was constipated, okay? So this could be me just, I got a defective one, okay? This could be me or like a user's defective guide or some bullshit like that, but I don't have anything else to say. His characters were bland and it reminded me a lot of Rhysand. Which is funny because I remember being obsessed with Rhysand when I first read A Court of Thorns and Roses. But I'm sure if I were to read it now, I wouldn't feel the same way. But that's an entirely different video. And so yeah, it's very reminiscent of acotar, and I'm not complaining. Like I said, I liked acotar when I first read it, and I still hold it to a high standard because 15-year-old me was in love. Okay, I ate that shit up, and I ate this shit up too, so I'm not complaining. As for Dain, I knew as soon as he was introduced that he was going to be the Tamlin of the story. I knew he was going to be a pain in the ass. I knew his only purpose was to make Xaden jealous or appear overprotective of Violet, and I knew he was only there for Violet to kiss him and for her to be like, and then just go back to Xaden. And because of that, I don't have much to say about him other than, why are you still here? Why are you still here? The door is that way. I don't understand. A character I actually liked, not to say I didn't like the other characters, although that's the thing, I didn't like the other characters, that's true, I didn't like them. I could stand them, I could tolerate them, but I didn't like them. A character I did like was Mira. I feel like this is Nesta. Alright, now that I'm talking about acotar and we're continuing to compare characters, I'm just gonna stick with it, and this is Nesta, okay? Mira, Nesta, same thing. This is Nesta if she had goals and drive and without Cassian's big dig as a distraction. So where I could barely stand Nesta, I actually liked Mira. Now for the villains or the wannabe villains of the story were, again, this book is very consistent, and the villains were also very consistent in terms of it was just unserious as fuck. Every single one of them. I don't even know if there's a true villain in the story in terms of like character wise, because obviously like the war and the other things that they're fighting, but are there any actual enemies or any actual villains in the story? Because reading it, really, this is what we're worried about? These are the villains? This dumb jock that won't shut the fuck up, this is the villain? I feel like the best way to represent this, or the best way that captured this madness in terms of the villainy in the story. So there's a scene where the writers go out and walk around and meet the dragons, or like show themselves to the dragons so the dragons know what they're working with, okay? And you know, beforehand, the writers are told that dragons are incredibly dangerous, right? Don't look them in the eye, don't approach them, just don't fuck up. Kind of the context, right? The setup of the scene. And then as soon as they start walking, they forget everything and just start talking shit about the dragons to the dragons. Like, did you not just hear that? Or I don't know if that scene was meant to just make them look stupid, because I mean the whole book is just big fuck you to the villains because they're all bad. I feel like that scene could have had a lot of potential, showing how the villains could be villains and the dragons could be dangerous, because what I took from it is the villains are dumb as fuck and the dragons are just normal. Because after one of the dragons finally incinerated one of the shit talking characters that was supposed to be a villain, I guess, in the group, I was just like, wow, thank you. It actually took you a while, because if I had been in your shoes, if I was a dragon, dead. First word that came out of their mouth, done. I'm done. The dragons, they just had common sense. They were just normal. And again, because the book is very consistent, this kind of dumb villain behavior continues throughout the book, because the villains, or James, what's his name? James, he's kind of like the biggest bully, I guess, in the book. What's his name? James or Jason? One of those. And he just does the stupidest things ever. And surprisingly, there are a lot of characters that follow up with him for some fucking reason. But I get it. They're all fucking stupid, so I get it. But it just continues in the book, and you're just like, why are you doing this? Like, why? What is the point? I don't get it. I do think the villains in the story could have used some work. And also, Violet would be considered the smartest in her group. To be honest, like, I would hope so. I would really, really hope you're the smartest one in there, because everyone there seems to be sharing the same brain cell. I guess we can move on to the enemies aspect, or lack thereof, because honestly, I personally did not buy that these two characters were enemies. It did not feel like they were actually enemies at any point in the book. I feel like they were introduced, there was some animosity between them, some distance. So Xaden is introduced and they give each other the side eye, they move on, and then something happens between the two and they go from like kind of being enemies to not really to not at all. That enemies aspect is not really explored, and I wish it had been, but it really wasn't. And considering that a big chunk of the book is literally their relationship as enemies, I would hope that they would explore that aspect a little bit more, because it was just kind of like, yeah, Xaden is bad, Violet should not be with him, blah. I feel like it would have benefited a little bit more if there had been more scenes of them actually showing their animosity, but also it makes sense because, you know, Xaden is a wing leader, so they don't see each other that much, so it makes sense. I get it. It's not really a complaint, it's just I feel like it could have been better. Okay, so now as for the fantasy aspect of the book and why I liked it so much is because I feel like the book kept itself pretty grounded in terms of chaos, because fantasy can be a little bit overwhelming when there's so much going on, and especially if you don't read fantasy, it's hard to keep up. But I feel like this book had a lot of entertaining and adventurous traits, but it also kept itself pretty grounded and you could easily keep up with it, which I think it's good. It draws you to continue to read more. So I see where the hype is coming in that aspect, but everything else is trash. Everything else, this book is not good, but I loved it. I love bad books that are good. Also, the dragons and the magic and the world building and just the adventurous aspect of this book, I truly really liked it. I really enjoyed that, and I see why people like this. I see why it's an entertaining story, because it was. I was entertained throughout, and I kept on reading and reading, although sometimes I was just like let me just close this real quick and I'll get back to it, because wow. So as for the overall plot of the story, I can't really say I think it's all that different or innovative because it felt a little bit recycled, to be honest. I mean, going in and reading about it, I was like instantly predicting everything that was gonna happen, because everything that was gonna happen felt like I had already read about it in a different book. So the plot for me was not anything out of this world, so that's why I'm a little bit confused why a lot of people were saying that this was like the next big thing or the it book when it came to fantasy, because I mean, it's just like any other fantasy book. I wasn't really impressed in terms of the plot, but I mean, because this is something I'm incredibly familiar with, it was welcomed. It was a nice little chill back book that you can just read and predict and be bored with. Even though I was able to predict everything from the get-go, the ending got me. I was a little bit surprised when it happened, because I didn't really consider it, just because it didn't really make sense to me, and also maybe I wasn't that caught up in the story as I thought I was, because I was confused when it happened. I was like, wait, why? Who is this person? What's happening right now? And then I realized, and I was like, oh, cool. And I am intrigued to see where things pick up in the next book, and I might read it. I might. Probably not though, just because I did not like the audiobook, and I don't know if I can read this, to be honest, from beginning to end. That just seems like too much. But yeah, those are my thoughts on Fourth Wing by Rebeca Yarros. I can totally see why people would read this as their introduction maybe to fantasy, even though it's a long ass book. So if that's the first book you choose to read for fantasy, wow. You're very committed. Even if you're just a regular fantasy reader and enjoyed this book, I can see why. It's an entertaining book. It obviously does not take itself too seriously, and it hopes that you don't either, so that you can actually enjoy the ride. Because if you so much as like start to take this book seriously or like question it, it doesn't work. You're not gonna like it. But if you go in with an open mind, and if you go in willing to take on the ride, you're gonna like it, because it delivers on that fantasy aspect. It takes you away, it shoves you into an entirely different world, and I welcomed it. I did. But yeah, those are my thoughts. I fucking loved it. I thought it was good. I needed to get the fuck away from my reality, and this shit delivered, and I'm happy about that. I think that if you want to do that, read this. It's kind of a commitment because it's like 500 pages long, but it can be done. It can be done. So yeah, that's it for me today. These were my thoughts on Fourth Wing by Rebeca Yarros, and I'll see you in the next one.